Thank you very much. So today I'll be presenting our work on augmented reality productivity in the wild. This work was done in collaboration with Ari Cardin, Hyunsun Cho, Katerina Fidalgo, Jonathan Wieland, as well as David Lindobar at Carnegie Mellon. So in this work, we contribute the results from a longitudinal diary study of augmented reality laptop use in everyday work environments. We derive insights from over 100 hours of usage across 14 participants, with the objective of understanding how knowledge workers will integrate an augmented reality laptop into their daily activities. Within research, there has been a longstanding interest in using augmented reality for knowledge work. Its integration into our Office of the Future was first proposed almost 3 decades ago now. Since then, researchers have explored using spatial and immersive technologies for a variety of knowledge work tasks, ranging from sense-making to working with spreadsheets. With the increasing availability of commercial devices, this 30-year vision is gradually becoming a reality. As devices become more ergonomic and computationally capable, augmented reality may eventually gain adoption as a pervasive medium for work. This raises the following question. How will knowledge workers integrate an augmented reality device into their daily activities? And what are the current opportunities and challenges? Here, we should acknowledge that there's already a substantial amount of literature on the usage of AR for various knowledge work tasks. However, most of this knowledge is currently based on short laboratory studies. While valuable, they differ from user experiences during everyday computing activities. Furthermore, the limited duration of these studies obscures our understanding of how this technology may shape people's behaviors once they have had time to adjust to its novelty. To address these gaps, we conducted a longitudinal diary study. For this study, we deployed a Sightful Spacetop AR laptop into participants' everyday work environments. This was notably a commercial device from Sightful and not a research prototype. So similar to conventional laptops, participants interacted with this device through a keyboard and trackpad. However, it used a pair of optical see-through glasses as its display instead of a physical screen. This device was functionally similar to a Chromebook. It is designed primarily to support browser-based applications. All browser applications are presented as windows on top of a virtual canvas, which effectively functioned as an infinite display space. Users can freely open, move, resize, and interact with these windowed applications. We recruited 14 participants for our study. Each participant completed at least 10 usage sessions across 2 work weeks. Specifically, they completed 1 mandatory session per day with the option to do more if they wish to do so. Sessions lasted a minimum of 30 minutes each. Importantly, these sessions took place in participants' everyday work environments where they carried out daily activities and tasks. In other words, participants were free to choose both the tasks they engaged in, as well as the environments in which they used this device. In total, our 14 participants completed 143 sessions. This amounted to 103 hours of cumulative usage, or around 7.3 hours per participant. To document their experiences, participants completed 15-minute diary surveys after each session. This included written reflections, as well as optional photographs of both their virtual workspace and physical environment. At the end of the study, each participant also took part in a 30-minute interview to debrief their experience in greater depth. Combining the collected textual and image data, we used a mix of content analysis and thematic analysis approaches to derive our study findings. So in this work, our main objective was to gain insight into how knowledge workers may use an augmented reality laptop in their daily lives and activities. Overall, our results provides a rich characterization of the core considerations that affected their usage, how these considerations influence user configurations of the AR laptops, workspaces, such as the number of and arrangement of virtual windows, and finally, the values and challenges of using AR for everyday work. Among the many results presented in the paper, I will now highlight a few key findings. Let's start by examining what users actually did within the AR laptop during our longitudinal study. Our results show that the device was used for a variety of typical knowledge work tasks, and within a single session, users often engaged in multiple tasks. Categorizing these tasks as either work or leisure-oriented, we found that in most sessions, participants engaged in work-focused tasks, but some were devoted to leisure, and in others we saw a blending of the two. Summarizing the results so far, in more naturalistic settings, users may often engage in multiple tasks within a single session, often mixing work and leisure. This should be accommodated for in future interface designs. Now, understanding the nature of participants' tasks is important because those tasks directly shaped how they set up their augmented reality workspaces. For instance, as a direct consequence of their tendencies to engage with multiple tasks within a single session, many participants reported frequently adjusting their windows in response to changing task needs. This included changes to window sizes, depths, and placements. The key takeaway here is that virtual workspaces are dynamically adjusted during use, largely in response to changing task needs. This is notably in contrast to prior work, which has focused primarily on static layouts, suggesting more opportunities for future work to study and support dynamic workflows. Another pattern we were able to observe from studying augmented reality laptop use longitudinally is the use of peripheral workspaces to park windows across multiple sessions to support ongoing or future tasks. This slide shows a participant workspace across 3 consecutive sessions. Notice how they used one window, which we have highlighted here in blue, to accumulate readings and resources that they plan to potentially return to later on for their work. A takeaway from this observation is that AR workspaces should support users in carrying workspace elements across multiple usage sessions so that they can seamlessly resume ongoing and future tasks. Last but not least, we observed that the tasks influenced the number of windows that users opened. Interestingly, on average, participants only opened 2 to 3 windows simultaneously, despite having an infinite display space. When participants opened 3 or more windows, the windows often supported multiple tasks. This results suggests that just because users are given more display space, they may not necessarily be naturally inclined to open up more windows, especially if it is just to support a single task. So we speculated several reasons for this. First, for everyday knowledge work-oriented scenarios, it is possible that users simply did not need to leverage AR's greater number of windows for their everyday tasks. Another reason may be legacy biases. Current displays limit the windows that they can use for a single task, and they may have been inclined to lean into workflows that they're already familiar with. Finally, it's worth noting that system limitations, such as the narrow field of view, may also have played a role here, but we'll discuss this later on in the presentation. Overall, it's worth considering whether and how we can encourage more effective usage of AR workspaces. Now, taking a step back, our results show that besides the task, several other considerations also affected how participants used and configured their virtual workspace, including their physical environment, social factors, physical comfort, as well as aesthetic preferences. Let's take a closer look at one of these other considerations, namely physical comfort. Our results indicate that several users leveraged the AR laptop's flexibility to work from a variety of postures, such as resting in bed. These postures go beyond what traditional screens can support, like one participant will lean back and work while looking up at the ceiling. But on the flip side, several participants' unconstrained usage of the infinite display also led them to experience physical strain. This is well encapsulated by this quote by one of our participants, where they noted that they were moving their head up and down, left and right, as a result of creating an expansive workspace arrangement. Overall, AR is a bit of a double-edged sword when it comes to comfort. It lets people work from new postures and locations, but they often need some amount of guidance to set up more ergonomic workspaces. Now, before we wrap up, let's shift gears to talk about some of the values and challenges we observed from everyday AR use. In terms of values, many of our findings are consistent with prior lab studies. This includes support for more comfortable workspaces, portability, multi-screen workflows, in situ information presentation, immersiveness, as well as privacy benefits. Our results also highlighted several challenges. First, it's worth noting that the usability is still held back to a large extent by the hardware and software, things like weight, resolution, and field of view. Some participants noted that the hardware limitations changed their behaviors. For instance, the small field of view may have been one reason why participants kept their window usage limited, as discussed earlier. But it wasn't just hardware and software. The challenges also came from interaction issues as well. First, several users reported that the expanded display was difficult to navigate with a trackpad. Second, while AR provided more flexibility for participants to arrange their windows, it also added an interaction overhead. Relating to this, results indicate that many users were simply not sure of how to take advantage of the new medium. We see this manifest, for instance, in how they struggled to leverage the flexibility of AR to create more ergonomic workspaces, as well as how they oftentimes resorted to familiar workflows using a comparable number of windows as what they were accustomed to with a physical display. Lastly, users reported having difficulties maintaining a balance between laying out virtual elements they wanted and being able to retain access to the physical world. These limitations all represent fruitful opportunities for future work. So to conclude, this work presented results from a longitudinal diary study of AR laptop use in everyday work environments. In this talk, I've highlighted several key takeaways. While many of our findings build on and align with prior work, looking at usage from a more longitudinal as well as ecologically valid perspective also revealed new patterns and opportunities. Finally, the results I've shared here only represent a small subset of what we report in our paper. So I would like to encourage you to look at the full paper if you're interested in learning more. Thank you very much, and then I'd now like to open the floor for questions.
Can you maybe elaborate on previous experience with the technology, user experience, and your onboarding process? Like, how did you get people to use it?
So for most of our participants, they did not have extensive prior experience with AR VR technologies. We did go through an extensive onboarding process for which you can find more details within the paper. We had them come in to the lab, and we effectively went through almost an hour or two of onboarding, and we were constantly in contact with them if they came up with any issues. So we would check in with them basically on a daily basis going forward to see if they're really acclimating to the technology itself.
Did they report on a cyber sickness or headache or anything like that?
Yeah, so that's something that you'll also find within the paper. I think there are certainly results show that there are certainly some physical discomfort as well as cyber sickness from a subset of the participants as well. Yep. I think there's yeah.
I'm sorry if I missed it, but you talked about multiple tasks happening. I was just wondering, how do you define task? Is it one window per task, or are you able to group multiple windows into a single intention?
Yeah, so the task categories we came up with was drawn in part from prior work as well as from a bottom-up approach via the thematic analysis process. It was not bound to a single or a particular number of windows. I think that's actually one of the interesting usage patterns we see emerge, but it's also very much aligned with prior work in terms of like using, say, two windows side by side for a comparison task and other sort of workflows that we saw as well. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for the interesting talk. So I was wondering if you looked into how people transitioned into using the device and out of using the device, if they only used it for 30 minutes a day, kind of on average. Obviously, they were doing work before and after that on regular computers, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
So did they just like end a task before they started using the device and then do a completely separate task on the device, and then, or did they actually try to carry a task across devices?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we saw a mixture of behaviors. I think a subset of participants, for instance, reported finding some more dedicated tasks that they wanted to perform. For instance, if they're limited by, so the device only allowed for browser-based applications, for instance. So perhaps they might reserve the device primarily for For those sort of tasks, I think there's a lot more to unpack there. I'd love to chat afterwards. For instance, one really interesting behavior we observed was because there's no interoperability between this device and their own devices, they actually naturally formed sort of hybrid workflows where they would have their own physical device as well as this device as well. So this is another theme that we observed within the paper.
Hi, I am Hyun-Soo Kim from Seoul National University. So I wanted to know, like, so this is a longitudinal study. I wanted to know if there were some behavior changes that happened during the study, since it's a longitudinal study.
Yeah, so I think maybe just one observation we saw was there was this tendency of, I think this is the same with most novelty effects, right? There's a tendency of wanting to really take advantage of the space, then we kind of saw that drop off later on. And that's perhaps just one thing we saw, and there's more as well.
So like, did they explain that they saw a limitation in the hardware or something?
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons, as well as among others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as Nevin said, I'm reporting another in the wild study, so basically it will be a little bit repetitive of what we just heard. So just a short introduction. So as you know, recently XR has been heavily advertised as a productivity tool. For example, the Apple Vision Pro. There are also these Lenovo Think Reality classes, or as was just presented by Ife, this Sightful Space Stop. And research has also shown some advantages of using XR for knowledge work because you have this large display space. You can also support specific knowledge worker tasks. For example, in our previous work, we looked at interactions with spreadsheets or authoring presentations. And you can also do things like reducing distractions from the real physical world by, for example, adding partitions in an office so that you get a more private space, as was done by Lee et al. But as was already mentioned before, these were all lab-based studies, and they are really usually short durations and oftentimes also like artificial tasks. Therefore, it's important to do long-term and in-the-wild studies. One of our studies that we did before was this study where participants worked in VR for 1 full week. So in that study also the participants could work on any tasks they liked, but it was still a lab-based study, so they were using it in our lab. And then you just heard the presentation about this work, which lasted even 2 weeks. And participants were using it in different locations in the wild, also with their own defined tasks. But I would argue 1 or 2 weeks is still a rather limited period of time. As was also mentioned by Ife, participants might not really know how to take advantage of the AR or also VR. So therefore we thought it would be better maybe to ask people who used such a device for even longer periods of time. And this is where the Apple Vision Pro comes in. So we saw online that people actually used it for all kinds of things, like meaningful real-world tasks such as coding or working with documents. And at the time of when we did our study, the Apple Vision Pro was out for roughly a year. So there were some people who actually had the chance to use it for a year. And so, yeah, and also these people used it voluntarily, right? So they bought it for themselves. They were not incentivized by any kind of money or study or whatever. So we decided to interview these people to get some understanding and motivation, why they bought it, how they actually use it, what they think is its value, and what they might be missing. So first we reviewed some public comments about the Apple Vision Pro on Reddit. I will not go into detail about that. You can read it in the paper. And based on these comments and also some prior work, we came up with a set of questions that we wanted to ask in our interviews. It included demographics and, as I said, why did they buy the Apple Vision Pro? how are they using it and what they think is missing. And we also recruited participants through Reddit, Discord, and InSpace. InSpace is an app on the Apple Vision Pro where you can meet up with other people. We required them to have used the Apple Vision Pro at least for 40 hours, but I think most of them use it far more. So this resulted in 10 participants who were willing to do this interview. We did it through WebEx, individually with all the participants, and it lasted between 30 and 60 minutes. So as I said, we had 10 participants. Their mean age was 48 years old, which is pretty high, I would say, compared to other studies that we already did. 9 participants were male, 1 female. They were mainly located in the US and Canada, but also one from UK and Belgium. They came from very diverse areas, so from IT, law, fashion, journalism. And what they all had in common was that they were very familiar with the Apple ecosystem, so they rated their familiarity of 4.95 out of 5, which is basically higher. So about the participants, they owned the Apple Vision Pro between 4 and 12 months when we did the study. All of them reported that they would be using it regularly. Then we kind of grouped them into 3 groups. So 5 of the participants said they use it several days a week, and every time they use it between 1 and 3 hours. Then there was this one person who used it exactly 3 times a week, 8 hours each. So every time he was in his office, he would only use the Apple Vision Pro, and if he's at home, he would use something else. And the remaining 4 participants, they reported to use it daily, 5 to 8 hours each. So for most of their work, I would say. Then we also asked them why they initially got the Apple Vision Pro, and some answered with a clear goal to improve their workflow, such as eliminating physical monitors or devices like iPads. They wanted to increase the display space or fade out the physical environment. Some also mentioned entertainment, a general interest in XR, a hype, so they felt like this is the best time to buy this, or just because they were long-term Apple users. So for some people, I had the feeling like they bought all the Apple devices, so they need to buy the Apple Vision Pro as well. So most of the participants mentioned that they used native apps and screen mirroring. So the screen mirroring provides them with some continuity because they can just use the apps that they have already set up on their computer and just look at them through the Apple Vision Pro, basically. Most of them also described similar setups. So they usually have this main window in front of them, which is often this mirrored Mac display. Then they have other apps on the sides, which could be like communication, music, notes, browsers, which are usually then the native apps. And as there's no minimizing functionality, some reported that they would put content above their head, so they could still like reach it, but it was out of their focus. Also, all of the participants, they used physical devices in addition, such as keyboard, mouse, or trackpad. And for some of them, the Apple Vision Pro actually replaced or heavily reduced the use of other devices, such as iPads and monitors or laptops. The tasks that the participants reported doing resembled the typical knowledge worker tasks, such as text editing, fact-checking, using the browser, writing code. Also, one person did video editing because it was part of his job. They also used it for communication and video calls. And actually, this Apple Vision Pro persona was a bit controversial. So there was, for example, one person who said he would only use the Apple Vision Pro persona for all his meetings because he does not need to take care about what he's wearing or how his background looks. But others said they only use it if all the attendees would use it, because otherwise they feel like it's asymmetric, because like one person sees a real live video of the other person, but this other person only sees like a pre-recorded, sometimes a bit weird looking Apple Vision Pro persona. So this made them a bit uncomfortable. Then, what was also mentioned in the talk before, there's still this issue of physical comfort. So most of the participants, they tried several head straps before they found something that they felt really comfortable with. And this choice also seems highly individual. So you see here a range of devices, and yeah, everyone choose something else. Some of the people, they said they also like to remove the light seal because it gives them the impression that they have an increased field of view in AR. And participants also mentioned that they get used to the weight and discomfort over time. Yeah, regarding productivity, 8 participants said they felt more productive due to several things that I already mentioned. Also the large display, suppressed distractions, they felt increased flow. They could make the text larger because they had increased screen space. They could have better ergonomics because they can place stuff everywhere. And of course mobility because they can take it with them. But also there are the known limitations like weight, comfort. Pass-through resolution is still not that good. For example, you cannot read something. There are not enough native apps yet. There's also missing haptic feedback. They also would like to have more than one mirrored screen. And they also reported difficulties in sharing devices with other users. So I'd like to share some design guidelines that derived from the participants' responses. So first, XR should be easily integrable into existing workflows, so no one wants to spend a lot of time just setting this up. It should basically work right away. Then also the native apps are crucial, so you can also use it without always carrying your Mac with you. Yeah, it should support screen placement, resizing, minimizing, and also provide easy integration of physical input because you still need probably a keyboard if you really want to work. And also provide options to customize the device to the head. So in conclusion, our interview study provided some insights into how experienced users use the XR for daily work tasks. We saw that XR can be very usable even now for daily knowledge worker tasks, and most participants also feel more productive using the device. But there's still some challenges, of course, mainly hardware-based, such as weight and comfort, but also other things like, for example, the lack of professional tools that are available natively on the Apple Vision Pro. Of course, our study also has some limitations. So we only collected qualitative data through the interviews, and also the participants could be slightly biased. So maybe they are just Apple enthusiasts, or they spend a lot of money, so they want to make it look better than it is. I don't know. So we encourage further studies on this, hopefully with more participants, maybe also including other headsets, not just the Apple Vision Pro, and also maybe collecting some quantitative data. Yes. And that's it. Thank you.
Oleg Magruzov from Texas State. Anybody reported how they selected the items, gaze pinch?
No, that not specifically mentioned that. I guess they would use the gaze pinch to like arrange their screens and stuff, but they used mouse and laptop to like actually work with the stuff, I think.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because we're reporting the reasons why the productivity increased, that mode of operation was not mentioned. So I was wondering, maybe it was negative perception or something.
Yeah. Yeah, there were different situations. So they use it in all kinds of situations, so at home, in the office, some even in a cafe or in a bus. So there are sometimes people around, sometimes not.
And did you check if this affected the behavior of working? Or?
I mean, we couldn't really check. We just have their answers about how they feel in the situations. But most of them, they did not care that much, or they said like after they used it just a couple of times, they didn't care about like what other people think, and
Yeah, I'm asking this because maybe sometimes if you try it with people around, it makes you more biased, that it's cool, and people like, you can be even more productive because you feel that you're cool wearing it,
yeah,
but I don't know.
yeah,
The
that could be.
second quick one is, you tried it over multiple days, right? Did you check like the screens, if they changed the layout of the screen, or they kept moving until they fixated a setting, and then they were happy with this fixation?
No, we could not like track what they were doing because we just had one interview and they were just telling us
Okay, okay.
what
Yeah.
they did. Yeah.
Cool. Yep, please.
Thank you. That is a fascinating talk. Really, really cool. We had a question about so you have these users who report very long-term usage, like 8 hours per day. But those headsets, realistically speaking, they get uncomfortable. You have pressure. Did the users mention what their tricks are for this long-term use? Did they mention taking breaks, or did they comment on that?
Yeah. So different strategies. So they tried many different headsets until head straps until they found something that they found more comfortable. Also, as I mentioned, some of them said they got used to it. I think there were 1 or 2 people who said like they would even continue wearing it even though it's kind of uncomfortable. But probably I don't know, they felt some kind of advantage in doing so, I think. And also some mentioned that they take like regular breaks as you would also do in your normal day, like, I don't know, once every 2 hours at least you would go up, get a coffee or something like that. So they mentioned these smaller breaks in between. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. It's really interesting to hear about those experiences. I noticed that in your tasks that they reported, they were all productivity tasks, right? They were all knowledge work tasks. Is that because you filtered it, or did they not use the Apple Vision Pro for entertainment purposes, which is kind of the thing that we all think is the normal thing that people do, like watching movies and whatever.
Yeah.
And would that be included in the times that they report for the day? I mean, firstly, the first question, did they use that or did they not use that?
So some of them did. So, I mean, we focused more on the productivity tasks. So we did not ask them too much about their entertainment use. So I cannot be 100% sure how much of these hours that they reported, which are just also like approximations or whatever they said, were in the entertainment. But I know that several participants mentioned that they don't use it for entertainment at all because, I don't know, they don't see the need for that. Or they just use it if they like want to watch a video all by themselves, then they would maybe use it, but often they have family and then they would watch TV together. Because otherwise, yeah, you cannot share the experience. So several of the participants actually rather only used it for the productivity. No.
So we can take one more. Sorry. And you would stay with us.
It's not really related to your research, but I'm really curious. How did you find the participants?
Yeah, it was a bit hard. Yeah, we found them through like Reddit and Discord groups of Apple Vision Pro users, and yeah, we asked a lot of individual people and also posted about it, and finally we got 10 people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One last quick one, because you're
Thank you. I was wondering about battery life. So are they just sitting in one place, and so battery life doesn't really matter because the Vision Pros don't last for 8 hours, right?
Yeah, true. So I think most of them, they were at home or in the office, they could recharge it. I think 1 or 2 of them also mentioned they bought a second battery, but they actually did not use it that much because you cannot like hot swap it, you need to turn it off and on. So I think they usually kept it plugged in while they were sitting somewhere.
cool.
Okay.
Thank you. Hello everyone, so my name is Kelly Minotti. I'm a third-year PhD student at the EBISC laboratory, affiliated with the University of Évry-Paris-Saclay in France. So today I'm very pleased to present my latest study carried out as part of my thesis, entitled The Immersive Debriefing Comparative Evaluation of Full and Segmented Redo Methods in Virtual Reality. So this article was developed in collaboration with Daniel May, Guillaume Loup, Amin Shelali, Marie-Hélène Ferrer, and Samir Othman. Nowadays, virtual reality is increasingly used as a training tool across many different fields, such as healthcare, defense, politics, education, and even ecology. The reason is for this growing interest is clear. VR provides significant benefits such as higher learner motivation, stronger engagement, and most importantly, the possibility to simulate risky situations without any real danger. But it's important to remember that every simulation, whether in VR or not, is always followed by a debriefing phase. These two elements are inseparable. After the simulation, the trainer and the learner go over what happened, analyze the mistakes, and extract lessons. So here's the question. If the simulation itself takes place in virtual reality, why not also bring the debriefing into virtual reality? This could further strengthen motivation and, in the long run, improve learning outcomes. But first, let's ask ourselves, what exactly is it debriefing? It is a concept used in many different domains, which means there are multiple definitions. And to better understand its essence, here is a word cloud that summarizes the most frequent terms. At the center, we see the word simulation, learning, and experience, because a debriefing is always tied to an activity that has been lived, usually a simulation or a practical exercise. Around those central ideas, we see words like reflection, discussion, and process, because this shows that debriefing is not just about giving feedback, it is a structured moment of analysis. In practice, most debriefing methods share three main phases. So the first one is the reaction phase, where learners express their immediate emotions. The second one is the analysis phase, where they revisit what was done and identify errors. And finally, the summary phase, where key lessons are drawn. And it is precisely this analysis phase, essential to understanding mistakes and progressing, that we will focus on. So debriefing sessions can be carried out in several ways. So the most traditional method is simply a discussion between trainer and learner. And another option is to use a video recording of the simulation, which allows replaying the activity and analyzing specific moments. And more recently, we've seen the emergence of immersive approaches. For instance, we have the 360-degree video, because this is relatively easy to implement, and it allows the learner to relive the simulation in context, observing the environment from different perspectives. There are also now immersive replay systems, much more advanced, offering full immersion, so learners can move around the virtual environment, review actions from different angles, or slow down certain passages for detailed analysis. However, both approaches share the same limitation, so the learner here remains passive. They watch, they observe, but they don't take action. This raises an interesting possibility. What if debriefing became interactive? What if, instead of just watching, the learner could actively participate during the analysis phase by not only reviewing their mistakes, but also correcting them directly, testing alternative approaches, and transforming the debriefing into a true experiential learning moment? And now this is exactly what we bring with our immersive debriefing system called REVERSE, which stands for review, verbalization, and redo in simulation for evaluation. With REVERSE, debriefing is no longer passive. It becomes an active, dynamic, and learner-centered. So the idea is simple, is to provide a turnkey tool for trainers and VR training developers that can be used for any VR simulation made with Unity. With REVERSE, the trainer has access to an interactive review that allows spatio-temporal navigation, so the learner can freely move within the environment and jump to any point in time using a time-lapse bar. And during this review, the learner watches an avatar of themselves replaying the simulation. But the innovation lies here. At any moment, they can take back control. So either on their own initiative or on the trainer's recommendation, they can interrupt the review, correct their mistakes, and try another strategy, and replay the scene until a new outcome is reached. This is called the redo. And this process can be repeated as many times as necessary, exploring all possible scenarios, and in this way, the learner is no longer a passive spectator, but is an active actor of their debriefing. So when we talk about redo in immersive debriefing, there are two possible approaches in theory. The first one is the global learning, so the learner replays the entire simulation in one go. The advantage is narrative continuity and a global vision of the scenario. But the drawback is the risk of cognitive overload, too many elements to process at once. And the second one is the segmented learning. So here the simulation is divided into targeted phases. And this reduces complexity, improves retention according to cognitive load theory, and allows for immediate feedback. It also gives the learner more control over their path and focus. So this brings us to our research question. Does the distribution of the learner's activities during the debriefing significantly influence the quality of the learning experience and the resulting outcomes? So here we've conducted a study with the objective of comparing two types of redo-based debriefing. So the first group was the F-redo, which stands for full redo, where the entire simulation is replayed at the end. And we have the S-redo, stands for segmented redo, where only targeted sequences are replayed. We wanted to assess the impact of these two approaches on several factors, like the motivation, cognitive load, quality of debriefing, knowledge retention, efficiency, and also the pedagogical relevance from the trainer's perspective. So here you can see the simulation environment that we used in our study. So it was presented to participants as a mobile work simulator. Here someone working on a laptop while traveling on a train. This context appeared ordinary and realistic, designed to make participants believe that the goal was simply to evaluate their performance in a nomadic work situation. However, the real objective of the simulation was intentionally hidden, and in reality, it aimed to observe participants' behaviors and decision-making processes when faced with potentially risky digital situations, without explicitly telling them that it was related to cybersecurity. So throughout the simulation, participants were confronted with various everyday actions, such as entering a password, opening a file, or responding to a message or a phone call. Each of these actions seems harmless, part of a typical work routine, but in fact, every decision had direct and meaningful consequences within the scenario. Some choices allowed the experience to continue smoothly, while others introduced difficulties or even caused the simulation to end prematurely. So this hidden design created a rich and complex environment, forcing participants to remain alert and reflective throughout the experience. It also ensured that their reactions were natural and authentic, providing meaningful material for the debriefing phase. And because of this complexity, the debriefing phase is more important because it allows us to go back, analyze these choices, and reflect on how different decisions could have been led to different results. So here we carried out the study with 24 participants divided into two groups, 12 in the F-reader group and 12 in the S-reader group, and most of them were mobile workers. So we made sure to balance the group in terms of VR experience. So we had 7 experienced participants and 5 novices in each group. Regarding gender, the F-reader group included 8 men and 4 women, while the S-reader group had 5 men and 7 women. Finally, the average age was slightly higher in the F-reader group, around 36 years for men and 35 for women, whereas in the S-reader group, it was about 27 years for men and 31 for women. We also have a professional trainer who will lead the debriefing. Our results first show several strong similarities between the two modalities. The motivation was high and comparable in both cases. Knowledge retention was similar in the short and medium term. The perceived quality of the debriefing was equivalent, as was the cognitive load. And finally, the usability was just good in both approaches. However, we identified a clear advantage for the S-redo. It was more efficient, taking less time both overall and per task. It was also preferred by the trainer, who found it more flexible, more focused, and more importantly, more engaging. And above all, it encouraged learners to think actively about their key decisions. So to conclude, our findings show that both format works. There is no loss of effectiveness, but the S-Redo brings an extra value because it saves time and provides greater pedagogical relevance, especially from the trainer's perspective. Moreover, these results align perfectly with segmentation and constructivist theories, which highlight the importance of step-by-step learner-centered approaches. And looking ahead, several perspectives open up. First, the integration of intelligent assistants through AI, capable of automatically marking errors and suggesting relevant segments for redo. Second, the idea of adaptive debriefing, combining user freedom with automated supports. Third, conducting a more detailed error analysis, distinguishing between procedural errors linked to actions and conceptual errors linked to understanding. And finally, an important challenge will be transfer assessments, so measuring the real impact of simulation and debriefing on learners' behavior in real-world work situations. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them now.
Thank you for interesting talk. Is this software available somehow, or?
Now, no. We just need to clear the application because it's a plugin. We wanted to create as a plugin for any VR simulations made with Unity for now. And I just need to talk with my supervisors because it's for the end of my thesis. And maybe we'll make this like open for everyone. We don't know yet, but now, no.
Thank you.
And you're briefing this task. So in reality, the context in the pause between task 1 and 2, even it's longer, it's more or less enhancing the understanding or memory about the task. So if you brief everything quickly, maybe they're not picking some extra context cue in the meanwhile between task A and B. I don't know if you looked at this or you're willing to look at that point.
I'm not looking at this, but I think it's a good idea, and I think I will maybe looking at it. So yeah, no, I don't looking at it before, but yeah, it was a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because this is other aspect of when, for example, you do training for people in industry or production and so on. Even sometimes they want to spread it to make sure that they get it, not brief it. So I think it's maybe you look at it some point.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the talk.
I'm back. This time I will present to you something about the state of replication studies in ISMAR and VR. So maybe first about replication studies. So experimental studies can be roughly divided into exploratory studies and confirmatory studies. While the exploratory studies are more about like exploring new concepts in a research domain, the confirmatory studies test specific hypotheses. And a subset of those are replications. And these replications, they intend to verify, generalize, and establish previous findings. And verifying existing studies or findings is essential for the scientific process because it ensures reliable and generalizable results. So AR and VR has advanced significantly in the last 15 years, or maybe even more. And therefore, confirming previous findings is essential to ensure that the new findings builds on valid and generalized findings. And therefore, we had two aims when we did this work. First, we wanted to assess the current state of replication research in AR/VR. And we also wanted to collect some experiences from researchers in this community about their experiences with replication studies. So closely related fields have already explored the state of replication studies. In psychology, you might have heard about this reproducibility project in which researchers replicated 100 studies. And their results showed that many replications showed weaker support for the initial findings. This shows the importance of replication studies. And also in the area of HCI, there has been a paper by Hornbeck et al. They surveyed 891 papers from 4 years between 2008 and 2010. And they found that 3% of those reviewed papers were replication studies, and 50% of those replication studies successfully replicated the original work. But this paper did not mention anything about AR, VR, whether these papers were included. Probably some of them were. But so far there was no survey that addresses specifically the AR, VR domain. And so we wanted to address this. So we conducted a scoping literature review, including 15 years of papers from ISMAR and VR, including all full papers and also all the corresponding TVCG papers. We selected AR and ISMAR as a premier venues that focus explicitly on AR, VR topics. And this included 2,167 papers in total. Then in the first step, we defined some eligibility criteria, which you can see here. So the papers should include like hands-on AR, VR experiences. It should describe a user-based experiment, of course, and then it should also report quantitative data. And this already reduced the amount of papers to 1,320 papers. And then we checked all of these papers again to identify whether they are replication studies or not. And for that, we also defined several criteria. So first of all, it should cite the original paper, of course, otherwise we couldn't know that it's a replication. Then it should also seek to confirm, validate, or expand the original findings. Therefore, it should show either consistency with the methodology of the previous study, or it should report some deliberate variations. It should not just coincidentally have similar findings. There should be some, they need to want to replicate the study. And also, we don't consider it a replication if it's like if there are multiple studies in one paper and they kind of replicate each other. So overall, this left us with 83 papers that we thought were replication studies. This is roughly 4% of the overall papers. So then we categorized all these replication papers into 3 categories according to Hendrik's classification. This included strict replications. This means that the original studies were replicated with identical methods, procedures, and context. And this was only the case for 5 of the papers. Then there are also partial replications, which replicate the original study with deliberate or minor modifications to examine some other factors. This one included 31 papers. And then there were also the conceptual replications, which use different techniques or methods to check if an alternative approach would produce similar results. And most of the papers fell into this category. This were 47 papers. Now here you can see some plots about the frequency of replication papers over the last 15 years. So first separated by venue, ISMAR versus VR, and the second one separated by conference and journal. And as you see, the ratio of replication papers ranges somewhere between 0 and 11% for all of these years. But we could not really find a consistent trend. We can see that in the earlier years there were several years with 0%, but this could also be because there were way less papers in total. So, And also we could not see any apparent difference between ISMAR, VR, or journal and conference. So of the 5 strict replication papers that we had, 4 of them reported hypothesis tests that generated p-values that we could directly compare between the original and the replication study. And within these papers, there were 24 hypothesis tests that we could compare, and you can see the results in this scatter plot. This 45-degree line basically indicates equivalent statistical evidence for both of the studies, and the points below the line show increased statistical evidence for the replication, and above the line it shows weaker statistical evidence in the replication. So similar to the reproducibility project, it indicates somewhat weaker statistical evidence for many of the replications because they are more above the line. Then, as I already mentioned, to complement the paper survey, we also conducted an online survey to ask AR/VR researchers about their experiences. And we got responses from 61 researchers. They had various experience level and academic positions, as you can see here. 39 of these people have conducted a replication study before. They reported that the most common reason were to verify previous findings and for generalizability. However, there were also many reasons for not doing a replication study. As they mentioned, among those were lack of time, lack of funding, or lack of available data. Also a low perceived value, and because it was not really encouraged by the community and could also be hard to publish. And the people also mentioned some additional challenges, such as inconsistent information or missing information. This could also be due to the page limit, which sometimes makes it a bit hard to really specify all the details. Then they also mentioned non-random sampling, both in the original and the replication studies. And of course, also the publication bias. So overall, we found similar to other fields that the replications in AR/VR are rather scarce, so around 4%. And we identified several challenges that might contribute to this. So first, the rapid development of AR/VR technology. So if a replication is attempted, it is often done with newer updated hardware and software, which makes strict replications quite difficult. That's probably also why we saw very little of those. But it also shows the importance to confirm earlier findings. So if the hardware evolves, maybe you need to check if the things are still valid. Even more difficult would it be if you have some custom-made displays, because they're probably only available to certain labs. Then there are also methodological challenges, because there might not be detailed artifacts or maybe inconsistent reporting, so you're not even that sure what happened in the original study. And of course also the cultural challenges, as I mentioned. There are no strong incentives from the community to do the replication studies, and oftentimes novel contributions are prioritized. So therefore we would like to make some recommendations. So there could be dedicated funding calls, awards, or publication tracks dedicated to replications to make them more popular. Then we could also educate early career researchers on the importance of methodologies of replications, and also help instill a culture that values verification alongside innovation. If we do the replications, we could indicate them explicitly and provide detailed information about deviations or adaptations from the original studies. And we could also develop some community-wide guidelines and best practices in experimental design, artifact sharing, and reporting to ensure consistency among all the researchers. And with that, I already come to my end. If you're interested in replications, I would also invite you to join our workshop on Sunday afternoon. We also will have a keynote by Daniel Zielasco. Yeah, you're welcome to join there. Thank you.
Did you discover some inheritance, like replication of own studies or of studies of your PI, like Dr. Vater?
I'm not sure. What do you mean?
Did you discover some type of inheritance, like people replicate their own earlier studies or studies of their PIs?
Yeah, we have that actually. I think I even have it on an extra slide. If I yeah, so 41 where is it? 41% of the replications were done by the same group, if that's what you mean, and 59% of the replications were done by like different groups. So same group means at least one of the authors was in both of the papers. Yeah. So slightly more papers were done by different authors.
So I usually I work in systems and hardware, and in those communities, there's a recent attribute of artifact evaluation. So especially for people who build artifacts, it's highly encouraged that they submit their artifacts to be evaluated, and then they get a badge, and this is all officially supported by ACM, for example, and definitely promotes at least open source sharing of code and replication. Not that there are many replication studies, but you know, it's easier to replicate a study when you're trying to build on top of it.
Yeah, yeah.
So just a suggestion.
Yeah, yeah, that's very helpful. Yeah.
Thank you for very interesting and, in my opinion, very important thing. So I don't have a question, just have a comment like, thank you very much. Yeah, I think this is really needed when I see technical, what we do in engineering in general is kind of pity that we don't do the replication and we don't really validate the results. So this is one of the most important, in my opinion, activities that we should focus on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I can frame it as a question, but it's probably more of a comment, so I'll just say what. Okay, I can phrase it as a question. I was just wondering why you picked IEEE ISMAR and IEEE VR as the two VR conferences, and it's more of a comment because like ACM VRSQ, for example, VRSD, sorry. I think they actually have a replication track, and I would have kind of been interesting to see like also the differences of how much it actually helps having a dedicated track for this. So maybe just a comment for future work, because I think this is very important, so I can just agree with the previous commenter. And seeing if replication tracks actually help might be quite interesting, like just having dedicated tracks only for replication.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know, maybe Daniel will talk something about that on Sunday, about how this goes with the replication track. Yeah, I guess we had to stop somewhere, so we chose VR and ISMAR as the main conferences, but of course we could extend this anytime to more conferences.
Thank you, fascinating work. You have this step where you narrowed, building on the question about paper selection, you have the step where you narrowed it from something like 1,000 to 100 papers to 80. How hard was that step, and how did you do it?
It was hard. It took a lot of time for, I mean, we have several co-authors, and yeah, all of us had to look through a lot of papers and check whether they are replications or not. Yeah, it's a manual effort because we cannot automatically do that. No.